Hi, everybody, and welcome to Friday Night Spotlight, brought to you by Jones Ford Buick GMC, your hometown dealer for more than 50 years. I'm Brian Wright, and I'm joined by Maria Vasquez. And kind of bittersweet, this is the last time we'll be talking football this year, but it's also a great day to be talking football because, of course, we are talking about your state champion, Santa Cruz Valley Dust Devils. And they won the 2A state title over Benson in dominant fashion, 42-7 on Saturday afternoon. This was Santa Cruz's first state title since 1990, state title number 8 overall. The first one for Coach Richard Davis, who has done a fantastic job in his 7 years with Santa Cruz. So first thing, Maria, is if you want to, before we start breaking down the game, if you want to just kind of give any of your thoughts just kind of on this 2020 season for the Dust Devils.
I mean, ever since I talked to Coach Davis, during preseason, you could tell this team was on a mission, and you know, anything short of taking the championship wasn't going to sit okay with the team, and that really showed just um, from how dedicated they were throughout the season. I mean, there was always that uncertainty of, hey, are we going to get a game this week, or is something going to happen and all that? But these boys never wavered at all, and it's really great that they ended up on top.
Yeah, I think that's important to point out that they did this during, a season that was impacted heavily by the pandemic. They had to be extra disciplined every single week to make sure that their season could continue. So congrats to the players and the whole staff for that. A couple of my overarching thoughts on this team. This, we know how dominant they were in the state championship game. I mean, it was a 7-0 game at halftime, so the final score is a little misleading. But they dominated in the second half and ultimately finished that game in a way that I think we expected. To see them win that game by 35 points does not surprise me at all. But I also want to mention, so this team went 9-1. Their only loss was to Casa Grande, 35-14. Casa Grande, not only a 4A team, they were the number 1 seed in the 4A playoffs and made the semifinals. So really incredible. They beat 2 3A teams that were on their schedule. And the 7 games that they played against 2A teams, including the playoffs, they outscored their opposition 349-54. There was only one close game. That was the semifinal against St. John's. They actually had to come from behind to win that one 27-20. But just about as dominant of a team as you could find in 2A football. Maria, let's get to the game on Saturday. So as I just mentioned, this was a defensive struggle in the first half. Santa Cruz only led 7-0 at the half. They were up on a 6-yard touchdown run by Hunter Ogle, and that was it. It really was the way that Santa Cruz responded in the third quarter that turned this game around. So what are your thoughts just on this game, the title game against Benson?
After speaking with Richard Davis after the game, he said, that he was surprised by how close it was, and he told me that it seemed like they were struggling to move the ball, but Benson was prepared, and Benson came to play against Santa Cruz, and you saw that in the first half. I mean, they only had the 1 touchdown, and when he first took over the Santa Cruz program way back when, he's been there for 7 seasons now. He was familiar with all those Southern Arizona teams, and he knew that, hey, if I want to build a championship team, I'm at some point going to have to go through St. John's and Benson. And that's what this team did this year. You mentioned the semifinal game against St. John's. That was the closest game for the Dust Devils in their conference. And then you had the first half here against Benson. But in both games, they made the adjustments that were needed. And hey, that's why they're the champions.
Yeah, when I watched that, I covered the game as well on Saturday against Benson, and I was impressed with how strong Benson was up front, certainly in the first half, limiting Santa Cruz to just 7 points. They showed me a lot on their defensive line, and I thought they were, a pretty strong physical team. Now, they did lose their top running back to an injury early in that game. They still had a very capable running back in Jace Barney, filling in for him and taking the bulk of the carries. But it was what happened after halftime that's the story. And to me, Rashard Davis has been so good at making adjustments at half. Now, granted, he won a lot of his games by blowout, so he didn't really have to make a lot of dramatic adjustments throughout the season, but we saw what happened against St. John's, which was the game they were tested the most. They came out and played fantastic in the second half. And then this game, the third quarter was almost just like, it was kind of like the Santa Cruz we expected to see from the jump. They just kicked it into high gear. And I spoke to Hunter Ogle after the game, Santa Cruz's all-world running back and linebacker. And he told me that, he thought that they were wearing Benson down. And he could tell in the third quarter that they just weren't ready to kind of go the distance against Santa Cruz. And Santa Cruz was conditioned for this. And, they really started to pull away in that third quarter and make it their game. Maria, what else stood out to you just about, I guess in particular, the second half when the Dust Devils were able to take control of the game?
I mean, Hunter Ogle touched upon him. They've worn down defenses all season long. And yes, he's their go-to guy and everything, but he's not the only guy who can run the ball for Santa Cruz. During that game, Steve Calvin had 55 rushing yards, David Aviles added 51, and Ricardo Alaniz added 48. So if, your whole team focuses on Hunter Ogle, hey, the Dust Devils, they have backups, and they're equally as good at moving the ball. And okay, so you're focused on one guy, you slow him down, but you got to slow these other guys down. And there's just so much depth among this Santa Cruz team that if the opposing defense doesn't have those replacements, hey, you're going to be tired by the end of the game from how much these guys run the ball and how well they do it.
Yeah, there's so much depth on this team that, it's hard to mention, all the players who contribute, because they pretty much all contribute. You talked about Steve Calvin, and he's just a junior. He's kind of impressing me with just, he progressed. He got better and better throughout the season and had, some really great games. Obviously, he scored 2 dramatic touchdowns late against St. John's. Then he made some really great plays in this game against Benson. He is slippery. He's strong. When he gets the football, he's tough to bring down. He's spinning out of tackles and he's getting extra yards, and he's fun to watch. We know Wyatt Ogle, Hunter's younger brother, has just done such a fantastic job. He's the quarterback, but in particular on the defensive side of the ball, just a great defensive player in the defensive backfield for the Dust Devils. You had guys like, Robert Maldonado and Tanzer Gill on the defensive line doing their thing. And it was just, it was fun to watch because I think this is what we all expected Santa Cruz to do. Certainly it wasn't going to be easy. But I'm with you that early in the season, I watched their game week 1 and I thought, well, this is the team to beat in 2A. And I was pretty sure that there was no 2A team that was going to beat them. St. John's got close, but did not get it done. And Santa Cruz ends up hoisting the trophy. Any other thoughts just from this game against Benson, Maria?
You mentioned them, that whole group of juniors. They still have one more year, and it's going to be fun to see, you know, how they handle defending the state championship next year.
Yeah, I think this just was a really fitting kind of coronation, especially for the senior class, because those guys, as freshmen in 2017, they made it to the state championship game against Thatcher, and they lose this heartbreaking game on the final play, and they just kept kind of persevering, chugging along each and every year. Couldn't quite make it back to the final game. They'd get to the semifinals a couple times, but this was the year, I think, that everything was kind of set up for them. And like you said, it was only going to be state championship or bust, really. And they got it done. So congrats to them. Just want to mention again on Hunter Ogle, some of the things that he achieved this year. So against Benson, he rushes for 244 yards and 3 touchdowns. When you look at his season, now they only played 10 games because, it was a shortened regular season and all that. So 10 games, but he rushes for 2,096 yards, 25 touchdowns, averaged 10.5 yards a carry. His lowest rushing total of the year was 138 yards. That was against Casa Grande, 4A Casa Grande, and he had 2 touchdowns in that game. Maria, you mentioned it, that he had a goal of getting to 2,000 yards, and that would have been a pretty ambitious goal, even in a full season, which would have been closer to 13 games. For him to get there in 10 games is really astonishing. What a fantastic senior year for Hunter Ogle, and he finishes it off the right way. Any final thoughts on just the 2020 Dust Devils?
It might sound biased given that I've covered them for the past 3 seasons, but it's just been an incredible journey for this team. You mentioned it, the seniors, they were freshmen when they lost that championship game to Thatcher. And then the following year, they didn't even make it to the playoffs. And last year was a big year for them because they finally overcame that Achilles heel, which is Thatcher. And, they defeated them during the regular season, and you could just tell, okay, something big is going to come. And this season, hey, they finally got it. And honestly, I couldn't be happier for this group of guys.
Yeah, and I just want to say, too, that I think I speak for Maria and everybody else on our team who covered sports this year, is that, even during a pandemic when there was a lot of challenges, it was so great to be able to cover football, even though there was obstacles and a lot of things, that made this season unique and different. But it was just great to be out there every Friday night, bringing the games to you guys any way that we could. And, I want to thank all of our team for all of the work that we did. And it's fun for us. This is what we do. So grateful that we were able to cover football and bring you some sports during a time where there's a lot of tough times going on and people are struggling. So glad that we could contribute to brightening some days just a little bit here and there. That does it for this show. Remember to visit PinalCentral.com for all of your Pinal County sports action, and we'll be transitioning to winter sports very soon. And until then, we will see you next time.